So it's Monday, August the 5th. If you've been looking at the markets over the past week or two, the markets have been already nervous and the markets were already down before today. And today the market started out really, really down. Now, we did have a little bit of a midday rally, but uh, uh, here's the deal. So the NASDAQ is down about 11% since July the 10th. The S&P 500 is down about 6.5%. And there is a lot of fear going on, a lot of anxiety about how deep could this market decline go. And the answer is we never know the future. No matter how smart we think we are, we never know the future. And I will just say this about market declines: they are normal, they are a part of investing. How often do we get corrections? A 5% drop is not even considered a correction. A 5% drop is a bad week. A 10% correction happens about every year and a half. So if you look at the last 15 years, we've had about 10 corrections in the area of 10%. They are normal. And so I guess that would lead to the next question: is what's causing all this anxiety? Well, let's go back about 3 years ago. The Federal Reserve, back in the early part of 2022, uh, we had inflation at 9%, which just shocked the market. Not only did it shock the market, but we had been in about a 20-year period where inflation had been running 2%, 3% at the most per year. And the last thing we need to worry about was inflation. Well, all of a sudden, in the early part of 2022, we had to really worry about it because it went from 2% to 9%. The reasons, I think a lot of it, Fed easy money policies. The Congress was giving everybody a check during COVID. And ironically, 3 out of 4 Americans who got a check said they didn't need the check. And the Federal Reserve was just printing more money, printing more money. Now, it's one way to say the Federal Reserve is printing money, but printing money is borrowing money. And I think that is a whole different set of problems that we eventually have to deal with. But so we had an easy money policy by Congress for sure and by the Fed. And the belief was in late 2021, early 2022, that the Fed should have been cutting or raising rates earlier than they did. They were about 6 to 9 months maybe behind, which meant they had to play catch up, which meant we saw interest rates rise from 0.50% on the Fed funds rate to a whopping 5.5%, where they stand today. And the belief was that was one of the greatest moves in interest rates in the history of the United States, percentage-wise, several 100% rise in interest rates. The goal of raising interest rates is to squelch or squash inflation. And the Federal Reserve's goal is that inflation not be more than 2%. Rising costs hurt people, and they hurt the people the most who can't afford to have rising inflation. And all you have to do is look at the gas pumps and look at the grocery stores, look at interest rates on a 30-year mortgage. And inflation has been a big problem now for 3 years now. So the Fed came out last November and said they were going to cut interest rates 6 times in the next 2 years. Now, ironically, that caused the market to rally tremendously. And stocks and bonds in December, bonds rallied 12% just in the months of November and December. But then the Fed came out in January and said, inflation is still sticky, not going away. So we're probably only going to cut interest rates 3 times in 2024. The market didn't really like that. And so bonds have been struggling all this year. Stocks have been going great guns. I think just a couple of weeks ago, the NASDAQ was up about 24% at the peak, and the S&P was up about 18% for the peak. That's a pretty good year. And but then the belief was so the Fed came out in June, early June, and said they're only going to raise interest rate one time this year. So the stocks continued to rally, but bonds continued to lose money. And then about 3 weeks ago, there was a belief that all of a sudden the economic news here in the United States has been declining, depreciating, especially in the job numbers. And we had this report that came out last week. They were expecting job creation of 200,000 new jobs. And that number came in at 109,000. And the markets just turned on a dime, and we sold off on Thursday of last week, Friday of last week, and big time today on Monday. And part of that reason also was that the Federal Reserve, in the middle of all this bad news, the Federal Reserve came out Thursday and said, we're going to cut rates, but probably not until September. And the market really doesn't like that. And not only that, but over the weekend, it appears that economic slowdown is not just here in the United States, but all over the world. So I think, and I said this in our letter to our clients a week before last, that there was starting to be the belief that we could see a 10% correction. Well, we're already there in the NASDAQ, and we could easily get there in the S&P. Now, the fact that the markets have dropped, that is not newsworthy. The reason that the market dropped, the fact that it looks like the Fed, who was 6 to 9 months too late in raising rates, now might be late in cutting rates. And I will say this, we don't know the mind of the Federal Reserve. It would not surprise me that the Fed doesn't come out in the next week or two, call a special meeting and cut interest rates, and that would certainly calm the markets down. Again, we don't know the future, and so what are investors to do with this? Well, let me just give you my belief here. If you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and even in your early 50s, and if you're predominantly in stocks, I wouldn't do a thing. If you're saving money, you're probably saving money through your 401k plan. Just keep doing it. Don't do anything different. Definitely do not suspend your contributions because the market's going down. Why would you do that? Because when the market goes down, you're buying your shares every week, and you're buying in today on sale. You got a nice little sale going on in stocks. Now, if you're older and you're near retirement and you have bonds, here's a great part of this. Bonds have been rallying during this period of time. And while bonds had certainly had really 3 years of underperformance, bonds have been overperforming the last 30 days, and we're up good today, which is the way bonds should act. Bonds should give you a safe place to put your money when stocks are going down. Our clients, we have been advocating for over 20 years, 23 years, a bucket strategy of having a third of your money in a safe bucket, a third of your money in a 50-50 portfolio with some gold in there, and then the last bucket, money you don't need for 15 to 20 years, have that all in stocks. So for our clients, there's nothing our clients need to do because while stocks are down, where they're down is money you don't need for a long time, and the monies that you're taking out to live on today are rallying big time. Over the last month, the aggregate bond index is up over 4%, and the TLT, which is 20-year U.S. government securities, are up over 6% the last 30 days. So the market is actually doing everything it's supposed to do. It's just that when you pick up the newspaper or you go on the internet and you see stocks were down 1,000 points this morning at the opening, it's very disconcerting for a lot of people. And it goes back to one of our pieces of advice we try to give our clients is don't let emotions rule the day. Emotions are great when you're 16 and you got a girlfriend or a boyfriend, but boy, when you're investing money, emotions are not your friend, they are your arch enemy, and they make you do things you wouldn't ordinarily do. So with that, calm down. It's going to be okay. And I hope this message, if you're listening for our clients that can tune into this, it's okay. Relax. Enjoy the rest of your summer. Football season's almost upon us, and baseball's getting exciting, and the Olympics, we should have one more good week for the Olympics. And enjoy your life. Don't worry about your money. Not going to change things, and you might do the wrong thing if you did do something. So good to talk to you, and we'll be back in touch in a week.
Content in this material is for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. The opinions expressed in this material do not necessarily reflect the views of LPL Financial.